timely, insightful, discussion and analysis of economic trends and markets. From Southern California to Sacramento, featuring business and political leaders, unique field reports. From Orange County and the campus of Chapman University, this is the Chapman Business Report.
And welcome back to the Chapman Business Reports, our weekly look at business, financial markets, and a special focus on the regional economies of Southern California, with, on this show, some special business guests. One special business guest, Scott Larson. He is the Executive Director of Homemade Orange County. It is not only the biggest builder of homeless shelters in Orange County, it is the original in that Homemade, an international organization now that builds shelters for the homeless, founded right here in Orange County, and for 14 years he has been heading up Homemade here in Orange County. We will talk to Scott about the particular challenges, especially in this economy, to provide shelter for a growing population of homeless, a young population of homeless. And then we'll have our great student feature stories. Amanda Starantino will take a look at women in film behind the camera. And Daniela Pardo will take you to a day in Los Angeles where everyone got rid of their cars. That's right, it's called Ciclavia. But we're going to start with Scott Larson, Executive Director of Homemade Orange County. Welcome.
Thank you.
You work for a nonprofit, you fight the good fight, as the cliche goes, but you started out, you wanted to be a commercial builder. You wanted to be, in fact, Homemade, founded by some folks from Presley, company owned by General Lyon. You wanted to be a General Lyon, Presley.
I did. When I was in high school, I had the desire to go into the home building industry and build homes, and it's just been
what better place to do it
at that time? To do it in Orange County. Yeah, absolutely.
And veered into nonprofit, first Red Cross, and now at Homemade. How come?
Correct. Well, I had a desire to give back to the community. I was raised here in Orange County and saw a variety of things in my path that took me into the nonprofit industry, both education, then the Red Cross, and then ultimately that brought my desire to be a home builder and my desire to make a difference in the community together through Homemade.
Because in your present role at Homemade, you deal with all the headaches that the commercial developer, but you don't get the remuneration.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's not like you were avoiding dealing with regulation and city councils and planning commissions. You do that all the time.
No, we do that all the time. Absolutely. With what Homemade does, we're building the doors that house the homeless. But through that process, we have to deal with everything that a regular builder does, from design to entitlement to ultimately financing and construction.
Take me through a typical project, maybe the latest that you built, or that you facilitated building, because you have builders who build for you.
Well,
right?
I can tell you what we're doing that's coming up very shortly. There's a group in Fullerton that now is called Pathways of Hope. It was Fullerton Interfaith Emergency Services, and we've actually built for them 2 previous times. And what we're going to be starting in about 2 months is an 8-unit apartment building to house homeless families. But the journey that we've been on with them has gone back a couple of years, from siting the property for them to build, ultimately designing, getting the city approval and buy-in, and then figuring out the financing. And now ultimately getting ready to start to build.
Incidentally, 3 classes of customers that you build for. So these 8 apartments would be for the long term?
Well, we've actually built for 3 different populations, or 3 different types of housing, and it's really important to understand when people think of the homeless, there's a variety of different doors that they can go through. One is obviously emergency, someone that needs some place to stay tonight. And we have built that type of housing. The next housing is someone that might need longer term stay, a couple months to a couple years. That's the transitional housing, and we've built a lot of that in the community. And ultimately is the permanent supportive housing where someone might stay permanently.
And through that process, they contribute a greater percentage to their rent.
Each program is different, but you're right. The whole idea is to take someone that needs to get on the path to self-sufficiency. And sometimes those journeys are short, sometimes those journeys are long. But ultimately, the desire is that they are back as an effective, productive member of our community.
Sure, and so when I see as part of your organization there's 25 service providers, a lot of these service providers are helping to provide employable skills and all sorts of things so these folks can become self-sufficient.
They do. Recently we completed a project for Laura's House, which is a domestic violence shelter in South Orange County. And they take the woman wherever she's at. And the woman left a crisis situation, but that woman may be employable, but that woman may need to work through a variety of different issues in her life. And so the service provider brings and assesses that need and gets that woman and their children back into what needs to be addressed in their life. We have the opportunity to build the place that starts, where that journey back into society takes place.
Jumping back to the Fullerton project, let's pick it up. So you've worked with these folks before. Now they want to build an 8-apartment complex in Fullerton.
Correct. You know, that building there, and what'll be exciting as you see that develop, it's integrated perfectly into the community. This is right down from where City Hall is at in a nice mixed-use community. And we really see the ability to build projects that blend right in. And so after it's built, you're going to think this is a regular part of the community, but it's providing a vitally needed service for that, for not only the community members, but for the residents that will live there.
From a financial standpoint, how can you make it look as good and
Well, part of it, being started by the home building industry, we get to bring in people that are great architects and great designers, but we use their skills to do what they do best to serve the homeless. And so when we bring in an architect, they look at the existing community and they design it in a way that reflects who they are as their design skills. And so they're giving back to the community through their skills and expertise.
For the most part, are services, are they donated?
You know, it can vary. I can tell you the last couple of years have been difficult in the building industry. And so we try to align each project up where there's plenty of funding to pay, but we also ask people to contribute. And you'd be surprised that even in difficult times how much people are willing to give.
Talk about the scope of the problem here in Orange County.
Well, one, it's a very challenging thing that people may not realize how many people actually are homeless. So, for example, today, there'll be roughly maybe 8,000 people that have no place to go tonight. Over the course of the year, that number could expand to nearly 20,000 people that experience homelessness. But when you look at people that are really precariously housed, particularly children, the Orange County Department of Education pegs the number at nearly 28,000 students that are in the K through 12 range.
Going to school.
That are going to school.
Don't know where they'll stay.
That are homeless. They don't know where they're going to stay. They could be living in their car. They could be living in a motel. They could be living in a shelter or somehow precariously housed. But that number for children alone is nearly 28,000.
And so as good as the work that Homemade does, been around for nearly 25 years, you've got 1,000 beds, so you're only plugging up a little bit of that.
Well,
just the kids.
The question will be the system and how people get through and what opportunities there to leave homelessness. And the biggest challenge right now on the front end is we have very, very few emergency beds that are available. And so when someone is looking for that door to leave homelessness, that first door is not there. And so the whole system then backs up. So we really feel that if we are able to build enough emergency beds, particularly for homeless families, then the pipeline of how they get through to that, ultimately, the permanent place where they get to stay, will be available.
What would that emergency shelter look like?
Well, it could look like a variety of different things. Not very far from here is a group called Casa Teresa that is for homeless pregnant women. And at Casa Teresa, you may not know that that shelter is there.
I saw the address, and I walk past it most every day, and I did not know that it's there.
And that's part of the idea, is that we want these projects, particularly projects that people might think aren't good things for their community, that they see them as an asset. And Casa Teresa is an exact example of that. You've walked by it every day going to the Dodge School. And so you've got the ability to build something that meets a community need and that blends right in. So the idea would be to have plenty of opportunities, whether or not it's a pregnant woman, women and children, families, and even individual men and women, to find that start.
Over the last 5 years, what kind of increase have you seen?
You know, what's interesting, when you look at just alone, when the cold weather shelter that is run by Mercy House at the Armory, this last year alone, the homeless families that showed up at the Armory was nearly 400 in the 4-month period of time that they were open. That number increased dramatically over last year. And so the economy definitely is making an impact on just families that are seeking that emergency shelter at the Armory. And so the need is great, and the challenge is right now there is not, the Armory program is closed. And so where do those families go right now?
Closed because?
Well, funding.
Right.
Funding there right now is not only funding, but even the location for year-round shelter. So as a community, we're looking for the right opportunities to build year-round emergency shelter, to not just replace the Armory, but to give key opportunities for people to leave homelessness.
And your funding was founded by the home builders whose ranks are not what they were and whose fortunes are not what they were. So that used to be maybe most of the funding would come from.
It was. When Homemade was founded, we were founded as an outreach of the Building Industry Association, and that is where the majority of our funding came from. And you're right, the last 5-6 years have been difficult. So we have had a lot of support that recognize what Homemade does, come to support what we do, and then ultimately the shelter projects that we're involved with. And so we're lining up funding from a variety of sources, both private and government, as well as the donated materials and labor to do our projects.
I remember years ago reading a story about a horse trainer. He said, back in the day I used to have one owner who had 10 horses, now I have 10 owners and they own all part of one horse. Yeah. Is it kind of like that in putting your deals together, that you have many, many more parties?
It is. You know, when we look at it, everyone, there's a variety of roles that people can play. Right now, the Fullerton project, which we were talking about, there's a heavy government role. We're using a lot of public money. The Laura's House project, which we completed back in December, had mostly private money. And so we look at each project individually to try to determine what is the best way to finance it. Is it through private capital campaigns or is it through public money? And so each project is a journey and each project has unique nuances to it, but there are clearly ways that people can get involved and participate based upon what their interests might be, their financial capability. The key thing that we have a desire on with all of our projects is that ultimately they're debt-free. So that way the service provider that we build for is not paying, so we're not taking out construction loans, because then the service provider, whether or not it's Pathways of Hope, Laura's House, that they ultimately, as they're raising money, it's going directly into their programs, not to pay off a debt, not to pay off a loan.
Nothing illustrates the good work that you do, the type of situations people are in, like an example. And you have a young lady who volunteers for you, I think has for a long time, named Julia.
Yes.
And it's quite a story. It's a very sad story in one obvious respect. Would you please tell her story?
Julia is a young lady who grew up homeless, and with both her mother and her father and her sister. And when Julia was in her mid-20s, she became pregnant and decided to take a different journey and entered into one of our pregnant women's shelters called Precious Life Shelter, which is in Los Alamitos. And that her new journey began. And she realized that there was a different way to live her life. So she ultimately graduated from the Precious Life Shelter program and delivered a healthy baby girl. She then had the opportunity to live in a project that we built for the Orange County Rescue Mission, Buena Park, and now she's working for an insurance agent in Cyprus. The interesting part of her story is that Julia's father, Smith, was one of the homeless men that were murdered this last December. And Julia really is an advocate for the path that someone can take and really reaching out to people that are homeless and really providing them with the opportunities to start their life anew. So Julia is not only an active volunteer with us, but she's an active volunteer with Precious Life, and she's really seeking ways that churches and community members and others can get involved, because she's an example of someone who was living a particular life, had an opportunity for a new beginning, took that opportunity, and then now she's really seeking other ways for people like her father to end their homelessness.
I can imagine that. So you've got this complex in Fullerton, 8 apartment units. What must the waiting list be like? How do you determine who gets in? You know,
and that's a challenge for each of our shelters. Even the Village of Hope, which we built for the Orange County Rescue Mission, has a waiting list, and we try to give the opportunities for someone to come in, and then each of the providers looks at, is the program right for them, and then can they make that journey? And some of the shelters have guidelines and restrictions, but we really try to look at giving enough opportunities that anybody can start anew. But you're right, the need is great.
The cities, the county itself, they're your partners on every project. How do we do on that score? How does Orange County? We mentioned Homemade founded here in Orange County, to the county's credit, but the general reaction, the general take would be that, and it may be a misnomer. I know when you look at charitable giving, Orange County does much better than most other places. But how do we do as far as working with your organization through the whole process? You have to help you get your land and
correct. Well, the interesting thing is that there are a variety of ways that the government is involved, as you would expect. We have to work with cities, we have to work with the county, we have to work with each of the governmental approving agencies, and we have advocates. There are people that really come alongside of us with each project. It doesn't mean that there isn't opposition, and it doesn't mean that we have to work through community input. Even the Fullerton project, as favorable as the city is, we had to work through some community relations, which we overcame. But it really is important that we have very strong relationships with not only the elected officials, we have strong relationship with each of the supervisors, we have strong relationship with city council members, because they are the ones that ultimately make that choice. and the decision to build a shelter in their community. And we can show them that there are good things that can be done. So it starts with government, it starts with then the community members to realize that we can address homelessness in an effective way in our community. And our desire is that each community recognizes and each city recognizes that they have a role to play. There's a very important thing going on right now with city housing elements related to a bill called Senate Bill 2, where each city has to look at the opportunity to build emergency shelter. So we are at the table with cities helping craft that. So it is an important role that Homemade plays in laying the groundwork for these shelters to be built.
How do you determine success? I mean, obviously, it would be great that you would build, you mentioned the biggest need now is emergency shelters, and you'd like to build more, but at the same time, people might look at that and say the need keeps growing, and we're
Correct.
providing these successes also on the other end,
right.
That whether they go from your emergency to temporary to long-term, eventually they leave. How do you measure success?
Well, on our end, I look at, there's individuals that you could point to like Julia, that obviously is a success at the end. But that success has to start somewhere. So on my end, a success for me would be that there would be an opportunity for anybody seeking to leave homelessness. And so as I look over the course of the next couple of years, the ability to have year-round emergency shelter will be a success. And the county has that. There's the 10-year plan on homelessness in the county, which is called the Commission to End Homelessness, and that is one of our key objectives. And so as we look to build those, that will be a success that I could say has taken place, that we have year-round shelter and that there is the opportunity for anybody that wants to leave homelessness that they can get there.
How do they know where to go?
Well, and that is another challenge that we're addressing, because there's multiple.
Chances are they're not watching this program.
Correct. There's a service called 211, which is an information referral line. That is a place to start. But we are examining for the county as a whole, because it's a system and there's a lot of nonprofits that provide services to the homeless. How do you find it? That is a big question. And so we're working with people like the United Way and others to devise a system where there is a single point of entry. And then you can get to a variety of different nonprofits. Because if you're homeless, where do you look? Do you pull out the yellow pages? Do you call a church? The system does not provide an easy access. There's 211, which is one point, but we want to create a better system so that way you definitely know. You as an individual, you run across someone that is in need, here's the number, here's the place to call.
Let's go back to this Fullerton project. It'll get built. How active are you then? Because there's a program and there's this whole transitional process. How
Correct.
active is Homemade then?
You know, in a historical way, we were like a home builder. I would build you a home, you'd buy the home, I would never see you again.
You hope.
I would hope. No construction defect issues. But on Homemade side, we have an ongoing relationship with our providers. We don't have that relationship. So we do a drive every year called Essentials for Young Lives, where we get the community involved that are providing and collecting diapers and other essentials for the women and particularly babies in our shelters. Right now, tonight, there will be 400 babies in shelters across Orange County. So we run this annual drive to collect diapers and wipes. It's a community service that we do for our service agencies. And so we stay involved. The other thing that we do, and we just completed this, we did some energy retrofits on a project in Placentia. So we went back, and this is a shelter that is an older shelter. Energy bills of $1,500 to $2,000 a month. So we've done some energy retrofits, we've done some green technology, and we just completed it a couple weeks ago, so in about 2 months we'll have our new energy numbers. So we have a desire that our shelters not only provide good services, but that they are run efficiently and that their physical, the built environment is still maintained and taken a good path. So we play a role with that as well in maintaining, to a degree, maintaining the shelters that we're involved with.
Let's give folks an emergency shelter. I'm sure you don't expect much, if anything, from the residents, but transitional, certainly long-term, you do. Just a general example, what is the contribution that, say, a family is expected to make? And I think you said this one in Fullerton is a long-term?
It is. Well, the Fullerton project, there's several phases to it as well. There is a short-term stay in a couple of the buildings that we've built, and then this other will be long-term. The families and the residents get involved with a variety of different programs. One is financial literacy. So they take them through financial training. Are there credit issues? Are there things that they have to work through to repair? They take them through education opportunities. What new job opportunities that they need? Because you may be aware that just to afford a one-bedroom apartment, you need to be earning roughly $26 an hour.
Yep.
That translates to close to $55,000 a year. So what types of jobs are going to be out there? So the shelters and the services provided, they work at job training. They also deal with family issues, family counseling. They get into some of the root issues that each family is involved with, because there are things that people bring in that they need to unpack and take care of. Some of the shelters even get involved with family reunification. Precious Life, for example, and Casa Teresa works with these pregnant women to reunify with other children that might be in the foster care program. So they work with each client and determine the path that's going to be most successful.
Most of the ones you're mentioning, most of your builders of a religious affiliation, is that fairly typical?
You know, actually not. When we look at the service providers themselves, roughly half have been of a faith-based orientation. And then on our builder side, it's not necessarily there either. So we definitely have people that get involved, that care about this community, that care about Orange County, and particularly on the building industry side, they look to give back with what they do. That was the whole founding of Homemade. The intent was, why do a run, why do some other type of an event for a charity when we build? Right. Why don't we take what we do best? And that's one of the appeals that we have to the business community in general. What do you do? What is the core business that you're involved with that can be replicated and can be a service to the community? It's been done through the building industry. It potentially can be done through any other business environment.
Scott Larson, 14 years here at Homemade. You've obviously been successful. I see you got a commendation by no less than the president. Yeah, so. Plan to stay here, or is you're moving on? You know,
when I came to Homemade, the idea was, you know, let's see what this opportunity is. Maybe 2 years, as people think they don't want to have too much job change in there.
Life's what happens while you make plans,
it does,
right?
And the exciting thing for me is that this is a journey that I'm on, and every project is unique, and there are clearly unmet needs, so I'm definitely here.
If people want to help out, and I assume they can do it directly to your organization,
they can.
Tell them how they can do it.
Well, there's the simplest way is going to our website, which is homeaidoc.org. So HOMEAIDOC.org for Orange County, and they can find all the information that they need there.
Okay, thank you very much. Scott Larson is the
Appreciate it.
Executive Director of Homemade Orange County, largest builder of homeless shelters in the county, and the original across the world. When we get back, a couple of great student feature stories, including a day without cars in Los Angeles. Stay with us on the Chapman Business Report. Welcome back to the Chapman Business Report. It's time for our great student feature stories. We'll begin with Amanda Starantino and her look at an event recently here on campus, which brought together some of the most powerful women in the entertainment business in Hollywood, all behind the camera.
Hollywood wears heels today as it visits Chapman University's panel event, Women in Focus. For women in the film industry, their numbers pale compared to men. That said, this panel shows that there is a lot of progress being made.
Even in 2012, women still have a very long way to go in Hollywood. Sure, they have made their success in front of the camera, but today we'll concentrate on the women who made it all happen behind the scenes. Female producers, directors, and screenwriters will answer the questions of how they blazed the trail to success and made it to the top.
The women of the event included Deborah Martin Chase, producer of Sparkle, Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, and The Princess Diaries; Leslie Dixon, screenwriter-producer of Limitless, The Heartbreak Kid, and Hairspray; Nina Jacobson, producer of The Hunger Games, One Day, and Diary of a Wimpy Kid;
Cute butt!
Jennifer Yoon Nelson, director and creator of DreamWorks Animation of Kung Fu Panda, Madagascar, and Dark City; and Stacy Snyder, CEO at DreamWorks Studios of The Help, Warhorse, and Seabiscuit. The event is moderated by Dawn Taubin, Dodge College professor and marketing consultant of The Help, The Dark Knight, and the Harry Potter film series. These women share the trials and triumphs, clearly showing themselves as outstanding role models for any young person seeking to enter the highly competitive entertainment industry.
The attitude they might carry with them that it's going to be harder. If they just check that at the door, it'll be easier.
And if you have the confidence to believe in yourself and what you want to achieve, then people will see that and say, okay, I trust this person's got the goods to do the work. And then they'll give you the work.
Statistics from this past year show that the industry is 2/3 men to 1/3 women, with only 5% of films directed by women, 14% written, and 25% produced. Dodge College professor and chair of special projects and industry initiatives Alex Rose hopes that having the Women in Focus event will change these future statistics with the young women filmmakers of Chapman.
So I think it's important for women to understand that they can rise to the top tiers and to show examples of women who have and who are very intelligent and creative, and to present more opportunities for our female students.
It is worth noting for you that almost all Chapman events, like Women in Focus, are open and free to the public. We finish up with a rarity in Los Angeles. There was a long stretch on a given Sunday where nobody had a car. It's called Ciclavia, a day with bikes, might be the translation. Here's Daniela Pardo.
A day without cars is what many people in LA experience as the city hosted its 4th Ciclavia event. Ciclavia is an opportunity for people to enjoy 10 miles of car-free streets in downtown Los Angeles. Ciclavia, meaning bike path, began in Bogota, Colombia more than 30 years ago, where over 2 million people ride their bikes every Sunday.
I like riding my bike and I like getting exercise too.
This event isn't just for cyclists. It's Southern California's own melting pot coming together in their community.
You see a lot of funny people, you see a lot of interested people, you see a lot of cool people, you see a lot of cool bikes. It's really, really fun.
Twice a year, people that attend Ciclavia are able to experience LA from a new perspective outside their cars.
And we ought to have one of those every month, right?
It's an opportunity for us to get out of our cars, to get away from this addiction that we have to the single-passenger automobile, and get to know our communities.
The mayor announced that Bike Nation, a bike share company, will invest $16 million in order to put 4,000 bikes in 400 different kiosks across the city.
More than 100,000 people attended this year's Ciclavia event. October 14 will be the next car-free day in downtown LA. In MacArthur Park, I'm Daniela Pardo, Chapman News.
We're back again next week with another look at business and the financial markets, with a special focus on the regional economies of Southern California, and the biggest thanks to Scott Larson and the great work he does heading up Homemade Orange County. We will see you next time. I'm Pete Weitzner.
Funding for this program was provided by Chapman University.